Hello. So this is take two from the TES Show. Unfortunately, we realized the microphones weren't working, I'm afraid. So if you were tuning in before, apologies. You would have just seen our mouths moving, but not really heard very much. So we've rectified that by doing this take two. So welcome. It's week two of ADHD Awareness Month. We're Empower Ed ADHD. And today we're live from TES talking to Fairley House. We have got Chantel Bailey, occupational therapist from Fairley House, and Shauna Burke, educational psychologist from Fairley House. And today we're going to talk about ADHD and neurodiversity and how Fairley House supports neurodiversity amazingly, basically. So my daughter Eva went to Fairley House from year 2 to year 11. She's got ADHD, some other co-occurring conditions, and compared to the mainstream school that she was at, like it was like night and day. It really set her up for success. And due to that support, due to understanding her ADHD, but more importantly, being supported through school by teachers and specialists that understand and can support ADHD and her other neurodiversity, she's now studying law at Collingham College. And I have got a huge debt of gratitude to Fairley House and really excited that they're volunteering their time to speak with us today to tell you about how Fairley House does provide this amazing support for students with ADHD and neurodiversity. So over to you, Chantel. It'd be great to just hear about how occupational therapy, how that helps students with ADHD and neurodiversity.
So I think part of Fairley House's magic is that we have a transdisciplinary approach. So our therapies are very much embedded into the classroom. We work very closely with the teachers, and we're able to embed a lot of the strategies in the classroom. But I think an added benefit is that the children are able to come to us for individual sessions as well. And that's where we're able to look at their gaps, build them up, and also build on their strengths. So it's quite a dynamic process, and we go into very different areas.
Yeah. So movement for ADHD is, so as we know, ADHD, it's a deficit of momentum, basically.
Yes.
And we basically run on authentic interest and stimulation. And we know, and there's evidence, isn't there, that movement, exercise is fantastic stimulation, right, for the ADHD brain. So I know that you do these movement kind of classes in the morning. It'd be great just to maybe just talk about how, what kind of outcomes do you see in terms of the students when they come back to the classroom after doing movement kind of class like that?
So we've got two programs that we run. So we have a morning program. So for the senior school, that's the strength and fitness. So during their registration period, as they come into the door, they come into the hall, and we have a circuit that's set up, and that's run by our occupational therapists and our head of PE. And in that circuit, they work through a number of activities, and it's really aimed at tapping into their proprioceptive systems and their vestibular systems. So all those sensory systems that are really key for supporting regulation. So what we find is that when they get that movement input, when they go up to the classroom, then they're ready for learning. So those that needed activating, they get activated. Those that come in really bouncy are able to down-regulate, and that gets them ready. And then throughout the day, our children also get access to movement in the classroom. So we have a movement break program. So teachers have access to cards, and we've got videos. And throughout the school day, they're able to access movement while they're learning. And that really has positive outcomes because they're able to get the movement that they need, but then come back to the learning and keep going. So, yeah.
Yeah, I gave that to you prematurely there, Shauna. But yeah, so it has a massive impact, and I guess that's what the mainstream very much is missing, because a class of, obviously it's much smaller classes at Fairley House. Yeah, classroom of 30 for a teacher where the students had, those movement breaks at different times. And I know that the disruption, and I think, it'd be great to kind of hear from you in relation to, strategies that kind of work at Fairley House, knowing, the evidence base they work, but how can mainstream kind of schools, how can they implement some of what you guys do really well?
I think they're a little bit creative, I think they could definitely implement some of the strategies in their classrooms. For example, doing things as simple as a wall press up isn't going to be very distracting, and it could be that students are seated at the back of the class or towards the edge, so that they're not disrupting others when they get out to have a very short, small movement break. But that's what's really going to help regulate that student in the moment, so that's also obviously really important. Again, depending on what it is they want, it could be fidgets. There are many different things that could be explored. I think sometimes perhaps there's a little concern that having toys or objects like fidgets in a classroom can be more distracting, but I think that's kind of maybe an older way of thinking about things. Are actually really helpful, and there are definitely things that can be put in place in a mainstream classroom to support those sensory needs that would not be hugely disruptive to a lesson.
And so those are, obviously adjustments. However, and I'm sure you probably can appreciate this, it's the approach, or rather the mindset, even behavior policies of mainstream schools would kind of prohibit the kind of adjustments you're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of the approach, to learning, obviously, how would you describe, what Fairley House does well in terms of their approach, and how mainstream schools, how could they adjust their approach in order to be able to provide those outcomes you guys achieve?
I think it's having that kind of a positive preemptive approach. So like Chantal was talking about, having the circuits in the morning before lesson starts. So we know that the regulation needs to happen, so let's do it at the start of the day before it needs to happen, building in the movement breaks in the lessons. I mean, it wouldn't really hurt in any lesson to stop for like 2, 3, 4 minutes so that everybody gets up and has a stretch. I mean, everybody's going to benefit from that. Even the teacher, I would imagine, could do with a little bit of a movement break or a shakeout. And what would that look like, just to reinvigorate everybody? Other strategies that would be supportive of children with ADHD, around working memory strategies and different strategies that can be embedded in the classroom. Ensuring that we're using visuals alongside verbal instructions at all times. Different visual supports on, just in the environment, on the walls, on their desks. Some students don't like to maybe feel like they're standing out. Again, all students could have, or we can have them in more subtle ways, say on the back of a school diary, for example, or little key rings or laminated cards. So there are different ways that strategies can be embedded. Old school approaches like zones of regulation as well, that are embedded for all students. So they're going to benefit your students with ADHD, but arguably they're going to benefit all students through, in the classroom.
I think also a key area that a whole school approach is looking at the executive function point of view, because I think ADHD and executive function, well, they're the same, isn't it? And that again, it's that universal approach, and looking at how whole school approach can support all students to organize. How can we support all students with the impulse control? So it's looking at those key executive function areas and putting strategies in place throughout the school day, with transitions in the teaching and learning, to support everybody. And then the child with ADHD doesn't feel like they are singled out and they're different, because it's a whole school approach.
And that's really important, because obviously ADHD and rejection sensitive dysphoria, we say that RSD is probably one of the most crippling traits of ADHD. And, we see that with the kids, how they deal with it. There's that perfectionism, right? There's also a lot of people pleasing, no boundaries. And then obviously avoidance. And I guess, a lot of the school avoidance of tasks in particular, very much comes from that RSD. If I can't do this perfectly, I'm not doing it all. Or what would that, the judgment from others. But actually, the worst part, from what you've probably seen as well, is the judgment that the ADHD has of themselves, like the standard that they hold themselves to. It's usually unattainable.
Yeah.
How does Fairley House deal? How do the teachers deal with that issue? The perfectionism.
Well, I think it's reframing their frame of reference. So we have a strong ethos. Well, we're very strongly pastoral, but growth mindset is a very important factor. So with us, it's looking at the things that they can do and all the positives, and reflecting on what they've done well, and how to change those fixed mindsets. And I think that's the key. And it's little by little. So setting them up for small little successes, because then that just builds on the trajectory.
And I think there's a lot of reassurance and confidence building for students knowing that everybody else at the school has got similar needs, even though everybody has a very different profile of needs and what their individual profile looks like is very different. But everybody feels like they're getting the support that they need. They're not standing out in any way. And I think there's a lot of power in that as well, and not feeling like they're the only person that's going through something that's challenging in an education setting. So as much as we can normalize, I suppose, all of our differences, our strengths, that's also going to help to get also in a mainstream classroom, the better we can get at understanding what, maybe different, neurodiversities, different learning difficulties, what they mean, what they look like in practice. The more we understand about those, the more we can normalize and put supports in place in every classroom.
I think the key is the accessibility as well, isn't it? So the scaffolding and looking at how they can access a particular task in a way that's going to make them successful. I think that's the key factor.
Yeah. You're doing so much well. It's so important, isn't it? And I think earlier you were saying, and we were making the point that what you do for these kids, it doesn't just help their academic outcomes. It doesn't just help them in terms of GCSEs and A levels, but far beyond that. Because we coach people in the workplace, and quite often the employees, when they don't understand the ADHD, they certainly don't accept their needs. They don't know how to address those needs, so they certainly cannot communicate their needs either. So nothing happens; they get stuck. But what you guys do for these, once they go onto the workplace, from what you're saying, they're going to understand, their challenges. They're going to understand and have access to tools that they can use in any kind of given moment to better regulate themselves, and also in terms of the work that they need to do. From the sounds of it, they're going to be able to perhaps, say to their manager, hey, no spreadsheets, right? Yeah, I'm not going to be able to kind of update that, or that report. I'm not going to be able to provide you with a written report at the end of every week. But how about, we do a call and I'll give you a verbal kind of update, and have the confidence, because you guys have been pushing that strengths-based approach, have the confidence to be able to advocate for themselves in that way as well. And that's how they're going to succeed in life.
Absolutely. And building those life skills is just as important as probably a lot of the lessons that we're teaching in the classroom. It's that developing understanding of yourself, your strengths, your needs, being able to recognize those times that you do need to regulate. When do I feel I need to have that movement break? When can I recognize, oh yeah, I have a weakness in this area of executive functioning. Okay, what do I need to do therefore to kind of help to compensate for that? I have a weaker working memory. Okay, but I know that actually I'm better visually than verbally. So don't tell me loads of things, but can we write it down so I can follow a checklist? So the more you understand yourself and your own profile, the better you can support yourself, all through school, education, and through life in general. So they're just building important life skills, really.
And I think it's a process. I think what we do is we scaffold and we grade our approach from when they start all the way to if they stay with us until year 11. So it's developing that process of how do they monitor themselves, what strategies, how can we support, and we're moving them to independence so that when they do leave us, they've got a toolbox of strategies that they're able to use confidently.
Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to your talk. Fairley House will be speaking very soon, so we've got to let them go. But if you want to, if you're interested, if your child could do with some special support like Fairley House offer, we'll get the details of Fairley House, put them in the comments section. It is fantastic. I can, as a parent myself, I think I'm going to be added on to their talk at the end to talk about, the experience as a parent of a student at Fairley House. But thank you so much, Chantal, Shauna, for your time, and good luck in the talk.
Thank you. Bye-bye. She's conscious of the time.
Right,